Hello. Today I want to share some thoughts and some critiques on the current state of the D&D community as it pertains to 1D&D and the future of Dungeons & Dragons as a whole. I did write a script for this, but I'm not going to read it, and I didn't finish the script. And I don't even know why I'm mentioning this. I guess I just want to approach this in a more conversational way because this is an open discussion on the internet right now, and I think it should be treated in that type of a way. Here's the thing. Fear-mongering is on the rise in this wonderful community, and it seems to be completely unfounded and destructive to the health of the game. Like, people seem to be getting mad without really trying to understand how to solve the problems they're mad about, or how maybe some solutions might already be there for the things that they're mad about. People are reading clickbait and reading Reddit titles and getting their panties in a bunch, and it's like, dude, get the sand out of your vagina, chill out, it's gonna be okay, right? We all love this game, we all want it to succeed, we all want to keep playing and let it be a good game. And by the way, like, having legitimate critiques of something is important. We should all be able to say what's going wrong, when it's going wrong, as it's going wrong, to better fix it. And we should be loud about that. But we should also be loud about what's going right. And we shouldn't have this sort of false outrage that has no merit. As I see it, there's three central pillars of this outrage. It's the open gaming license, it's 1D&D Game Design, and it's the Hansborough Wizards of the Coast monetization plans. So let's just get into it. Number one, the open gaming license. Okay? This is like the most perfect example of why this outrage has been for no reason, right? There was this rumor going around on the internet for reasons that weren't entirely apparent, other than the fact that the 1D&D playtest UA didn't have an open gaming license yet. The rumor was that there's never going to be one, that they're going to change their policies, and going forward they're going to really restrict the way they handle their IP. That has been proven false. Today, on December 21st, 2022, Wizards of the Coast came out and they basically said, well, they made an official statement and they said, hey, look, we haven't put out the gaming license because we're still making the game. And we're not going to make an open gaming license for playtest UA, right? That doesn't make any sense. So here, just so you guys know, everything's going to be fine. It's the same thing. We're going to do the same thing. We're just going to update things for the future because, like, we don't want people making NFTs and, like, doing dumb shit. So chill out. Everything's going to be fine. And there are going to be some other differences, but, like, nothing that was really saying, hey, look, you can't make homebrew content. You can't make third-party content that is published. You can't do XYZ thing. Like, everything that people do now is going to continue to happen. The other VTTs, the virtual tabletops like Roll20, Foundry, etc., are going to be able to continue to exist, and they're going to continue to have agreements with Wizards of the Coast about the content that they can utilize for free. And that's great. We should all celebrate that, right? As much as everyone was pissed off about them being scared that it wasn't going to happen, we should be equally excited that it will happen the way that they're presenting that it will. And to go along with this idea, like, they had already made statements about the the D&D gaming license the open gaming license as it pertained to 1D&D. Like, they didn't make official statements, but they said some shit, and it was basically like, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Everyone ignored it and just was like, they're never gonna make it. Anyway, it's a nothing burger. Isn't that great? I hope so. All right, number two, the 1D&D game design. Now, this is a more legitimate situation, right? Because people are going to disagree about the development of 1D&D regardless, and they should. We should all, like, it shouldn't be a thing where, you can't please everybody, right? And so people are going to complain. It's going to be a contentious issue, and that isn't necessarily inherently a bad thing. And being upset or being critical of the design is also not a bad thing. But it's taken this like extreme radicalized route, and it's sort of buried itself in different ideology that doesn't make any sense. So speaking of ideology, one of the things is that ideology has sort of buried itself into D&D, and Dungeons and Dragons is being co-opted for ideological shit. And don't get me wrong, like I hate fucking ideology co-opting my media just as much as the next guy. But are we really gonna get that upset about races being changed to species? Is that really the hill that we all want to die on? Right? Like, it's not worth it, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Why is this something that pisses you off? Really try to think about that. And you can make these arguments in ways that are rational, but are you just intellectualizing the emotional response to this thing? Or is this really the way that you feel? I think that's a worthwhile thought experiment, because them changing the word race to species really is not going to dictate the mechanics of the game. And you can ignore this, even if you really don't want to use it. You can completely ignore it, right? I understand the overarching theme of like it's a slippery slope, but the slippery slope argument is a logical fallacy, and we shouldn't be utilizing it to critique the design of 1D&D. Now, more legitimate critiques of the game are like critiquing the actual mechanical, like the D20 test, let's say. There's this thing that, a D20 test succeed on a 20, like the auto succeeds and auto fails on a 1 or 20. Just the fact that people are pissed off about that is dumb. Because really think about that. If you're rolling and you cannot fail on a 1, then why are you rolling? If you're rolling and you cannot fail on a 20, then why are you rolling? You shouldn't be rolling that dice. And so if you're upset that a roll can auto-succeed or auto-fail based on those rolls, the inverse is that that roll could not succeed or could not fail, right? Because what you're saying is that you want that 1 to not auto-fail. You want it to succeed if the numbers make sense for it. We're talking about, for example, a saving throw, let's say, where your modifiers exceed the DC just by default. Like you're rolling a DC 13 wisdom check and you have a plus 13 to your wisdom somehow, right? That's kind of the stuff that we're talking about. I cannot believe people are really upset about it. But even the fact that they are, doesn't that make it a good thing that they are listening to our input as a community? I know that people are saying, oh, well, no, it's just the dumb people, all the new players, and they're now dictating the game, and as long as there's enough dumb people saying they like something, then they're going to make this thing the way it is. You're crazy. This is the old man Jenkins saying, oh, you wily kids and your skateboards, and you're like, dude, it's okay. It's okay. And they're still listening to the older generations of players that have been playing this for, as long as whatever. I've been playing the game for a very long time, okay? I understand that things can be scary when they, are changing the thing that you love and they're not listening to you in the way that you think they should be. But the reality is they are listening to you, just as they're listening to everybody else. So stop being upset that they're not making the game the way you want it just because it's not the way you want it. Start to really understand the design goals of this game and critique it based on that. Like, for example, these videos that they've put out about they're, they'll put out the playtest and then they'll put out a little video, like a Jeremy Crawford interview about like going through some of the ideas of the stuff. And they are addressing the issues that the community has, by and large, from the first playtest that they dropped to the second. Like, there are a lot of things that they either inversed or tweaked in ways that the community felt was appropriate, or at least like those were the issues that the community was yelling about. So isn't that a good thing? At the end of the day, they're going to do what they want to do. This is input. It's not dictation by the community. It's us saying, hey, this is what we think, and they make adjustments or they don't. But the fact that they're listening and they're trying and they're developing the game with their stated design goals, this is all good stuff. What's the issue there? Right? I should have written a script because like I'm not making any material points, right? We should pull out some specific examples here, but the D20 test is, I guess, a good analogy for the bigger issue. Now, another thing with the D&D game design is the virtual tabletop. People are fear-mongering that one D&D is going to be designed around the virtual tabletop, and it being developed, side by side of the development of one D&D is dangerous to the development of one D&D because it corrupts that development. Is a completely legitimate critique and one that we should all be mindful of as we go through these playtests and take a look at the alterations to spells and mechanics. But so far, there's been no evidence that anything in the playtest material has been a reflection of any sort of development for virtual tabletop. Right? The examples would be like taking Phantasmal Force and limiting the scope of the spell so that it can be easily presentable in a virtual tabletop, or different terrain mechanics, or different, like a minor illusion. Illusions are a big one, right? Because illusions are kind of like whatever you can think of. And how do you do that in a virtual tabletop? Well, if we see that minor illusion says it's, or whatever spell, it like greatly limits that scope, then it's clear that that could be something that's going on. But thus far, there's been no evidence of that. And it's actually been the opposite. In these interviews with Jeremy Crawford, there's been no indication that there's a design goal that's anywhere similar to, hey, we want to streamline this so that it's easily transitionable to virtual tabletops. There's nothing like that. It's been the opposite, and you can see it in the text of the UA. You can play the UA and see it. So, yeah, like saying like, oh, I don't like the new grapple rule, I don't like the new jump stuff, like for this or that reason, like that kind of stuff is super legit. But saying, hey, like, they're making this game to be a virtual tabletop game, that's not legit, because you're ignoring the fact that what we have so far proves you wrong, right? It's okay to say, hey, listen, I don't like the way that guidance has been changed to a reaction, or bardic inspiration to reaction, but it's not cool to say, hey, they're ignoring old players because, XYZ, and I hate that the liberals are making race species, and I hate that. You get what I'm saying? I get that I'm kind of being very roundabout in the way that I'm presenting this, but I hope that in some ways you're kind of distilling what my point is here. Because I want to move away from the one D&D gaming license, and I want to go to the Hansborough Wizards of the Coast monetization stuff. That's the third, niche of outrage in this community. So there was a Hansborough shareholders meeting, I think it was, where they were basically saying like, hey, there's only 20, our audience monetize this product so far with, I forget what the statement was. Basically, the inference was that only 20% of the player base was really paying for the game. And those players were predominantly dungeon masters, and that Hansborough needs to find ways to better optimize the game, and they're going to heavily optimize the game going forward. I mean, not optimize, monetize. They're trying to find ways to monetize the game. So everyone said, oh, microtransactions and subscriptions, and they're going to turn the game into just like a cash cow. And Hansborough also owns Magic the Gathering, and they've botched that IP. So everyone was like, oh, they're going to, start doing all these crossovers and just like all these cash grabs, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that is fair. But like, let's calm down a little bit. If you were developing a product and only 20% of your customers were paying for it, wouldn't you try to find ways to monetize it a little better? That does not make them, overly greedy or turning it into some sort of cash cow. They're going to, sacrifice the integrity of the game for the monetization of it. Those things are not equivalent. And when you look at it, there's already subscriptions on D&D Beyond. There's already microtransactions on D&D Beyond. You can buy, for example, a feat out of an adventure, or you can buy a monster out of an adventure, right? Or a subclass. Those are microtransactions. There's also, like, I guess DLC would be those whole packs, right? And let's imagine a world where the VTT comes out and it's subscription based. Is that such a bad thing? Or maybe there's like cosmetic elements that you can unlock via a paid, paying for like, oh, I want my guy to have, I want more availability in terms of customization of my miniature. Whatever. They should be able to charge for that. That doesn't make them break, they're not doing anything wrong to the mechanical elements of the game. You don't have to play on a VTT. And many VTTs don't support the type of like monetization that I'm talking about to begin with. So stop getting mad about something that is not really dangerous to the game. Okay? I know, like usual, I just went in circles and this was probably useless, but I hope I really at least made one solid point here. This is basically it, right? There's fear-mongering. People want to clickbait into saying, hey, Wizards of the Coast is botching the game. They're designing it poorly, they're going to monetize it crazily, and they're not going to let people do third-party content. None of those things are true. When you really look at the design of 1D&D, they're, in my opinion, on the right track. And even if you're not of that opinion, when you look at the actual mechanics of the game, they're not doing anything that is overtly destructive in terms of their design goals. It might be different from your preference, but it isn't this thing of like they're sacrificing like the integrity of the game and the hardcore elements of the game to appeal to like a casual consumer, etc., etc. That's not what's going on. There's no evidence of that. Now there is a legitimate thing of like, because I talked about ideology, there's people mad that the liberals are politically correcting the game. Listen, there's a legitimate argument to be said for like, hey, when you sacrifice the coherence of the game in its presentation and in its lore, etc., for political correct diversity and options, you are creating a incoherent hodgepodge that loses its, I'm going to say it again, coherence. Because then it becomes just whatever, the whole kitchen sink, right? Becomes a pantry of like what any size, all sizes fit all. And so that can detract from sort of that the power of it. And I agree with that. I really do. And I find that to be a legitimate critique. But it's not, for me personally, a hill worth dying on. I'm still optimistic for what Wizards of the Coast has in store. And when you look at the actual mechanics of the game so far that they've presented in 1D&D, they are good. When you talk about the things that they have said in terms of their design goals, they might be different from your preference, but again, non-destructive, non-radical. They're not these things of like they're making a VTT game, they're making a fucking mobile game out of my D&D. That's not happening. Stop saying that. It's not true. Calm down, relax. Alright, well anyway. I love you, whoever you are. That's it. Bye.